I appreciate being part of this academy. As Matt said, being part of the academy, being listed as a biomedic dentist has truly shaped the practice I have right now. It's kind of amazing to think that this New York City office where I am, I'm practicing in New York City, which is a very interesting market for incorporating biomedic dentistry, that I'm actually busier now than I've ever been before, incorporating biomedic dentistry into my practice, with a big thanks to being found as a biomedic dentist on the Academy of Biomimetic Dentistry website. And so this lecture, this discussion is going to talk about what biomedic dentistry is, the nice introduction. We're going to go into the structural analysis. We're going to go into the ways to maximize bond strength. We'll go into ways of minimizing stresses on the teeth. And then once we take these principles, we're going to apply it to smile makeovers. So we'll start off by saying, what is biomedic dentistry? This is a nice introduction. So biomimetic basically means to mimic life, to mimic the natural properties of the tooth structure that we are replacing. Our goal is to emulate nature. So what biomedic dentistry does is it winds up conserving more pulps, which is our goal. We want to remove pathology. We want to leave maximum amount of tooth structure, and by extension, strengthening and reinforcing the teeth. Now, biomedic dentistry is based on a number of different things. It's based on science, and Dr. David Alleman did an amazing job putting together all the literature that biomedic dentistry is based on. So when we first took our initial course, he gave us 27 key articles, and when we took our follow-up course afterwards, he extended it to 100 key articles, and there are many more since then, but it's based on science going back since the 80s. It's also based on dental materials, and everything that biomedic dentists work with and use is very biological, very compatible to the human body. It's the gold standard of bonding agents. And we only use the ones that have been tried and tested in peer-reviewed literature and are by far the best in dentistry. And this is why people come to your practice from distances to do things like this, which is why biomedic dentistry can help you grow as a practice. And here's another case. This is a non-vital tooth. So this person had come to me on an emergency. Actually, this person is on TV, so she said, I cannot go without a tooth. So of course, you have to give all the different recommendations. You could say, you could do a bridge, you could do an implant, you could do, all the different things you would say, but then of course you make your recommendation on what you think would be best for the patient. So the person did happen to have their old crown or 3/4 crown with them. I used it to make a template and a putty index of the tooth. Then what I did was I isolated the tooth and got everything clean. And then I started to use that putty index to build up the lingual and the incisal edges as a guide. And then I started to build back the mesial and lingual walls layer by layer. And then I'm doing that. Everything is very layered. I will go over the reasons for layering and slow polymerization later on. So we're trying to de-stress the tooth and maximize the bond strength. And then once we get that built up, we created a circumferential layers of the polyethylene fiber mesh internally, and then fanned out larger pieces to serve as the DEJ for this tooth. Because again, we're mimicking the natural biological properties of the tooth structure that we're replacing. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Now, this is a case that I did probably about 9 years ago, and I would do it very differently today. So what I'm showing you now is not the way I would do it now, but at the time I felt I was doing a great job. So basically you can see how much gum and bone recession there was. You could see the gutta percha in the roots. Now, if you were to do a crown and cut it down to where the roots is to hide the margins, you would destroy that tooth completely. So I did not want to touch those roots. And so basically what I did was, the person had a root canal. I built up the entire access of the tooth. You can't, like, if you look at the upper middle picture, you can't even see the access. I blended it looks like the rest of the tooth, which looks really, really nice. And then I built the whole tooth up, but then I kind of cut it down to do this overlay. And there are a lot of things that I would do differently with this overlay. One, I would not create, this is more like a tabletop mini crown, creating a little bit of retention because I still didn't trust my adhesive skills yet because I was still new to this. So I would not create those retentive crown type preparations. I would make it, a lot more conservative and a lot more rounded if I were doing an overlay. That's number one. Number two, I wouldn't even do the overlay for this tooth. I mean, basically, I did a nice overlay table. I maintained the contact. I preserved the biorim. I kept it very conservative. It looks beautiful. Everything's sealed. This is still in place 9 years later. So it's a success that way. But what I would do differently today is I would avoid the onlay altogether. I mean, all the tooth structure was great. It was just the access where the root canal was. So why not just do an internal reconstruction, build it up, and leave it alone and not do a crown, not do an overlay, not do anything. There was no crack in the tooth. So why do it? So I'm a lot more conservative now, even though then I thought I was being very conservative. But still, the principles were the same. I rebuilt the walls, turned everything into a class 1, and then try to stabilize the boxes. I used the polyethylene fiber mesh to circumferentially, like an onion layer, line the internal aspects of the tooth to de-stress it, built back the dentin layers and built back the enamel layers, and eventually it looks like a tooth. And the great thing about this is you have control over the aesthetics, you have control over the contacts, and you can adjust it in the envelope of function, and this worked really, really well. It looks beautiful. So I like that. And again, I always say if you can rebuild a tooth without doing crowns, it's better and healthier for the gums, because you're maintaining the contacts, you're preventing irritation from the margins of crowns. So whenever I can rebuild something directly, I like to do it, unless there are cracks or hard biting forces or reasons to do something more indirectly. And I know that's there's a lot of thoughts on this stuff. Dr. Matthew Najad is phenomenal with the indirect restorations. Dr. Simone Della Peri is the Da Vinci of doing the direct restorations. They're both passionate about what they do and the way they do it. So one likes more direct, one likes more indirect. But the basic thing is you're doing the same biomimetic protocols and techniques and materials for all the different layers, from the metadental sealing and the resin coating and building back the dentin layers and using the rib bond, and also use all the techniques you use to de-stress and to maximize bond strength. But then when you get to the enamel layer, that's where you make the decision. I never use post. Here I use a fiber post in a whole bunch of Everex because I thought it was to be a temporary solutions. This is one of 2 posts that I put in teeth in the past 12 years. Otherwise, I don't do posts at all. And then I built back the dentin layers and the enamel, and here we go. And this held up for 8 years before he disappeared. I don't know where he is now, but that was pretty impressive. Okay, again, this is the article that I published several years back on the Biomedic Smile Makeover, and this is the case that I presented. It was 25 years of acid erosion causing the smile to look like this. And basically the goal of this article was to take there were 100 articles that Dr. Alleman presented to me, and I wove in about 90 of these 100 articles into the reference section of this article, this article I published. And what's interesting is the AGIS, the Inside Dentistry, said you can only use 2,500 words to do everything. And I basically said, submitted my case, and they said the references alone are more than 2,500 words. So it wouldn't fit into an article, but they loved it so much, loved the whole concept of biomedic dentistry. They said, you know what, we're going to do our first ever online piece and issue CE credits for every doctor to read this. It was online for 6 years, offering credits. So they told me to just expand it, flush it out. And I did this article, and it was fantastic. So always, whenever I do a smile makeover, I do great photography and wax ups. I take models and I try to build it up to see what's possible. And in this case, this bite was so collapsed, I had to open up the vertical dimension of occlusion. These are temporaries. So those temporaries are in his mouth for about 3 months.